My daughter's laugh cut through the auction room like glass breaking in church. She stood 3 rows ahead of me, wearing a navy dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension, her manicured hand resting on her husband's shoulder. The laugh was soft, almost musical, but it landed in my chest like a fist. "Say goodbye to your house, Mama," she whispered to the woman beside her, loud enough for me to hear, quiet enough to seem polite. "Someone else gets to worry about that leaky roof now." I stayed in my seat near the back, my purse clutched in my lap, my auction paddle face down on my knees. The room smelled like burnt coffee and floor wax. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everyone in a pale, sickly glow. The auctioneer stood at a podium up front, shuffling papers, adjusting his microphone. People filled the metal folding chairs, investors in polo shirts, young couples holding hands, a man in overalls chewing on a toothpick. They all had glossy brochures. I could see my house on the cover of the one in front of me. The white shutters I painted 3 summers ago. The rosebush climbing the mailbox post. The porch where I taught my granddaughter Nellie how to snap green beans. I thought about the letter I'd received 2 weeks earlier. Foreclosure notice. Public auction. Address, 428, Meadowlark Lane. My address. The one I'd lived at for 41 years. The envelope had been thin, official, cold. I'd opened it standing at my kitchen counter, the same counter where I'd rolled out biscuit dough every Sunday, where my late husband Marion had kissed my forehead before leaving for work each morning. The letter said the property was being sold to settle debts. It said I had rights. It said I could attend. It didn't say my own daughter had signed the papers. My daughter's name is Corinne. She's 46 years old, works in real estate development, drives a white Lexus, and hasn't spent the night in my house since her father's funeral 8 years ago. When I called her about the letter, she sighed like I'd interrupted something important. "Mama, we talked about this," she said. "You can't keep up with that place anymore. It's falling apart. You're falling apart." I told her I never agreed to sell. She said I'd signed a healthcare proxy. She said it gave her authority. She said she was doing this for my own good. She said there was a lovely assisted living place near her neighborhood. Ground floor unit. Meal plan included. She made it sound like a vacation resort. I told her I wasn't interested. She said the papers were already filed. So I came to the auction. I didn't tell Corinne I'd be here. I took the bus across town, transferred twice, and walked 4 blocks in shoes that pinched my heels. I brought my checkbook. I brought the deed to my house, the one with Marion's signature next to mine, dated June 1984. I brought a folder of documents my lawyer had prepared. And I brought my auction paddle. Number 42. When I walked into that room and saw Corinne standing there, confident and smiling, I realized she truly believed I wouldn't fight back. She thought I'd sit home and accept this quietly. She thought I was too old, too tired, too beaten down to stop her. The auctioneer tapped his microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We'll begin with lot number 1. A murmur went through the crowd. Papers rustled. People sat up straighter. I watched Corinne lean toward her husband, Brett, and whisper something. He nodded, squeezed her hand. They looked like a team. Like partners. Like people who made decisions together and faced the world united. I wondered when I'd stopped being on her team. I wondered when I'd become the problem she needed to solve. The auctioneer's voice droned on, calling out property after property. Each time, the crowd responded with raised paddles, shouted numbers, the crack of the gavel. My house was lot number 7. I had time. But not much. Will she really bid on her own house? What happens when Corinne sees her mother in that room? Stick around, this is just the beginning of a battle that will change everything. I bought the house on Meadowlark Lane in the summer of 1984. Marion and I had been married for 3 years, and Corinne was just a baby, barely walking, with fat little legs and a laugh that sounded like bubbles popping. We'd been renting a narrow apartment above a dry cleaner, and every night the smell of chemicals would seep through the floorboards and make me nauseous. Marion worked double shifts at the lumber mill, and I cleaned houses during the day while Corinne napped in a playpen I carried from job to job. We saved every penny. We ate beans and rice. We didn't go to movies. We didn't buy new clothes. And when we finally had enough for a down payment, Marion drove me past 428, Meadowlark Lane and said, "What do you think?" It wasn't much to look at back then. The paint was peeling. The yard was overgrown. One of the shutters hung crooked, and the front steps sagged in the middle. But it had 3 bedrooms, a kitchen with windows that faced east, and a backyard big enough for a garden. Marion said we could fix it up. He said it had good bones. I remember standing on that porch, holding Corinne on my hip, and feeling something I'd never felt before, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. We signed the papers a week later. Marion carried me over the threshold even though we were already married. He said it was a new beginning. He said this was our forever home. Over the years, we made it ours. Marion built a sandbox in the backyard and a tire swing that hung from the oak tree. I planted tomatoes, cucumbers, and marigolds along the fence. We painted Corinne's bedroom lavender because she said it looked like the sky right before night. We hosted Thanksgiving dinners, birthday parties, and summer barbecues. We filled that house with noise and love and the kind of chaos that makes a place feel alive. Marion fixed the crooked shutter. He replaced the front steps. He added a small deck off the back door where we'd sit in the evenings and watch fireflies. Every nail he hammered, every board he sanded, every coat of paint he brushed on, it was all love. That house wasn't just wood and brick. It was us. When Marion died 8 years ago, I thought about selling. The house felt too big, too quiet, too full of his absence. Corinne suggested it gently at first. "Mama, this place is a lot of work. You shouldn't be climbing ladders to clean gutters. You shouldn't be shoveling snow. What if you fall? What if something breaks and you can't fix it?" I told her I'd be fine. I told her I had neighbors who helped out. I told her I wasn't ready to leave the only home I'd ever owned. She dropped it for a while. But every visit after that, she'd point out something new. The roof needs replacing. The water heater is ancient. This carpet is a tripping hazard. She'd say it with concern in her voice, but I could hear the impatience underneath. She wanted me to leave. She wanted me to let go. I stayed because leaving felt like betraying Marion. I stayed because Corinne had learned to ride a bike on that driveway. I stayed because my granddaughter Nellie had spent every summer here since she was born, chasing butterflies and picking strawberries and sleeping in the same lavender bedroom her mother once slept in. I stayed because every corner of that house held a memory I wasn't ready to pack into boxes. The kitchen counter where Marion proposed to me a second time on our 10th anniversary. The living room where Corinne took her first steps. The front porch where I sat with Nellie and taught her how to shell peas. Those memories weren't just mine. They were proof that I'd lived. That I'd loved. That I'd mattered. But Corinne didn't see it that way. To her, the house was a burden. An outdated structure that required maintenance I could no longer provide. A financial asset that was being wasted on a woman who refused to be practical. She started talking about healthcare proxies and power of attorney. She said it was just paperwork. She said it was in case I ever got sick and couldn't make decisions. She said it was responsible. I signed the papers because she was my daughter, and I trusted her. I signed them because I never imagined she'd use them to take my home away from me. I signed them because I didn't think I needed to protect myself from my own child. She trusted her daughter with everything, and that trust was about to cost her the only thing she had left. Keep watching to see how far Corinne will go. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in October. I remember because it was trash day, and I just rolled the bin to the curb when the mail carrier handed me a stack of envelopes. Most of it was junk, grocery store flyers, credit card offers, a catalog for orthopedic shoes. But one envelope stood out. It was thin, white, official-looking, with a return address I didn't recognize. County Clerk's Office. I opened it standing in my driveway, still wearing my bathrobe and slippers, and the words blurred together at first. Notice of public auction. Foreclosure proceedings. Property address, 428, Meadowlark Lane. I had to read it 3 times before it made sense. They were selling my house. In 2 weeks. I called Corinne immediately. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the phone. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice distracted, like I'd pulled her out of something important. "Hey, Mama, what's up?" I told her about the letter. I told her there must be some mistake. I told her I'd paid my property taxes, my mortgage was paid off years ago, and I didn't owe anyone anything. There was a long silence. Then she sighed. "Mama, we need to talk." Her voice was calm, measured, like she was explaining something to a child. I used the healthcare proxy to transfer the deed. The house is being sold to cover future care costs. You'll be moving into Sunrise Meadows, it's a beautiful community, and you'll love it there. I felt like the ground had opened up beneath me. Future care costs? I said. I don't need care. I'm fine. She made a sound, half laugh, half scoff. "Mama, you're 76 years old. You can barely manage the stairs. Last winter, you slipped on ice and didn't tell anyone for 3 days. You can't live alone anymore. This is for your safety." I told her I never agreed to this. I told her that proxy was for medical emergencies, not for stealing my house. She didn't like that word. Stealing. Her voice turned cold. "I'm not stealing anything. I'm making sure you're taken care of. I'm doing what Dad would have wanted." That's when I knew she truly believed she was right. She truly believed she had the authority to erase my life and rewrite it the way she wanted. I hung up on her. I'd never done that before. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the letter until the words stopped making sense. I thought about calling Nellie, my granddaughter, but I didn't want to drag her into this. She was 23, just finishing college, trying to start her life. This wasn't her fight. I thought about calling a lawyer, but I didn't know any lawyers. I thought about going to the bank, but what would I even say? Instead, I did what I always did when I didn't know what to do. I made a pot of coffee, sat on my back porch, and tried to think. The oak tree Marion planted 40 years ago swayed in the breeze. The tomato plants I'd put in that spring were brown and withered. Everything felt like it was ending. But then something shifted inside me. A small, quiet anger that started in my chest and spread outward until my hands stopped shaking and my thoughts cleared. Corinne thought I'd just accept this. She thought I'd pack my things, move into her chosen facility, and fade quietly into the background of her life. She thought I was too old, too weak, too defeated to fight back. And maybe a part of me had believed that too. Maybe I'd spent the last 8 years shrinking, letting her make decisions, letting her talk over me, letting her treat me like I was already gone. But sitting there on that porch, looking at the house Marion and I built together, I realized something: I wasn't gone. I was still here. And I wasn't giving up without a fight. I spent the next 2 days doing research. I went to the library and used the computer, something Corinne probably thought I didn't know how to do. I looked up elder law attorneys. I read articles about healthcare proxies and power of attorney. I learned that just because I'd signed those papers didn't mean Corinne could do whatever she wanted. I learned that I had rights. I found a lawyer named Vernon Hastings who specialized in cases like mine. His office was downtown, above a bagel shop, and when I called, his assistant said he could see me the next morning. I wrote down the address. I ironed my best blouse. And for the first time in 2 weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. She's done being silent, but taking on her own daughter in court won't be easy. Find out what the lawyer tells her next. Vernon Hastings didn't look like a lawyer. He was younger than I expected, maybe 50, with wire-rimmed glasses and a wrinkled tie that looked like he'd pulled it from the bottom of a drawer. His office was small and cluttered, with stacks of files covering every surface and a coffee maker that gurgled in the corner. But when he shook my hand and told me to sit down, there was something solid about him. Something steady. He listened while I explained everything: the healthcare proxy, Corinne's phone call, the auction notice. He didn't interrupt. He didn't check his phone. He just listened, his pen moving across a yellow legal pad, his expression growing more serious with each detail I shared. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. "Mrs. Pruitt, I'm going to be straight with you. What your daughter did is legally gray. She used the healthcare proxy to justify transferring the deed, but that document was meant for medical decisions, not property transactions. The problem is, she's clever. She'll argue that selling the house and moving you into assisted living is part of your healthcare plan. That it's about safety and quality of life. A judge might side with her. Or a judge might side with you. It depends on how we present the case." My stomach sank. "So I might lose?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not if we act fast. The auction is in 10 days. We need to file an emergency injunction to stop the sale. And we need to revoke that healthcare proxy immediately." He pulled a form from one of the piles on his desk. "This is a revocation document. It terminates your daughter's authority under the proxy. You'll need to sign it in front of a notary, and we'll file it with the county clerk today. Once it's filed, she can't make any more decisions on your behalf. But here's the thing, she's not going to take this well. You need to be prepared for her to fight back." I thought about Corinne's voice on the phone. Cold. Certain. Righteous. I knew Vernon was right. She'd fight. She'd bring lawyers, paperwork, arguments about my age and my competence. She'd make me out to be a confused old woman who didn't know what was best for herself. But I also knew I couldn't let that stop me. "I have to do this," I said. He nodded. "Then let's get started." We spent the next hour going over documents. Vernon explained that even if we stopped the auction, Corinne could still challenge my competence. She could argue that I was unable to care for myself and needed a court-appointed guardian. To fight that, we'd need evidence that I was mentally sharp, financially stable, and capable of living independently. "Do you have a doctor who can vouch for you?" he asked. I thought of Dr. Calliope Marsh, my primary care physician for the last 20 years. She'd seen me just last month for a routine checkup. Blood pressure good. Cholesterol fine. Memory sharp. She'd even joked that I was healthier than half her younger patients. I nodded. Good, Vernon said. We'll get a letter from her. We'll also need bank statements, utility bills, anything that shows you're managing your affairs responsibly. Leaving his office, I felt both lighter and heavier. Lighter because I had a plan. Heavier because I knew what was coming. Corinne wouldn't just be angry, she'd be humiliated. She'd see this as a betrayal. She'd tell people I was being stubborn, irrational, ungrateful. She'd paint herself as the dutiful daughter trying to help her difficult mother. And maybe some people would believe her. Maybe they'd look at me and see a fragile old woman clinging to the past. But I didn't care anymore. I wasn't fighting for them. I was fighting for me. For Marion. For the life we built. For the right to decide how my story ended. That evening, I went to the bank. I needed to make sure Corinne didn't have access to my accounts. The teller, a young woman named Shay with bright pink nails, pulled up my information and frowned. Ma'am, it looks like there's a joint account holder listed here. Corinne Pruitt. She has full access to your checking and savings. My heart dropped. When did that happen? I asked. Shay scrolled through the screen. About 3 years ago. You both signed the paperwork in person. I vaguely remembered Corinne convincing me it was a good idea. Just in case something happens, Mama. So I can help with bills if you need it. I'd trusted her. Again. Shay looked at me with concern. Would you like to remove her from the accounts? I nodded. Yes. Right now. She handed me a form. It would take a few days to process, but it would be done. Corinne's access would be revoked. Another thread cut. She's taking back control, one document at a time. But the real fight is about to begin at the auction. Don't miss what happens next. The night before the auction, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house creak and settle around me. Every sound felt significant, the hum of the refrigerator, the rattle of the pipes, the whisper of wind through the window frame. This house had its own language, and I'd learned to speak it over 41 years. I knew which floorboards squeaked. I knew which doors stuck in humid weather. I knew that the bathroom faucet dripped unless you turned it just right. These weren't flaws. They were personality. They were proof that this place had been lived in, loved in, shaped by the people who called it home. I got up around 3 in the morning and made tea. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Marion and I had shared breakfast every morning, where Corinne had done her homework, where Nellie had colored pictures and told me stories about imaginary friends. I traced my finger along a faint stain in the wood, grape juice, spilled during Corinne's 8th birthday party. She'd cried because she thought she'd ruined the table. Marion had laughed and said it gave the table character. Now it's ours forever, he'd told her. Every mark tells a story. I wondered if Corinne remembered that. I wondered if she remembered any of the stories this house held, or if she only saw dollar signs and square footage. At dawn, I got dressed carefully. I chose a simple gray dress, low heels, and the pearl necklace Marion had given me on our 20th anniversary. I wanted to look put together. Dignified. Not like someone who needed to be managed. I packed my purse with the documents Vernon had prepared, the revocation of the healthcare proxy, a letter from Dr. Marsh confirming my mental and physical health, my bank statements, and the original deed to the house. I also brought a photograph. It was old, the edges worn soft, the colors faded. Marion and me on the front porch, Corinne between us, maybe 5 years old, grinning with missing front teeth. We looked happy. We looked whole. I didn't know why I brought it. Maybe I wanted to remind Corinne of who we used to be. Or maybe I just needed to remind myself. I called Nellie before I left. She was the only person I'd told about the auction. She'd wanted to come with me, but I'd said no. This was something I had to do alone. Still, I needed to hear her voice. "Grandma, are you sure about this?" she asked. Her voice was tight with worry. "I'm sure," I told her. "What if Mom gets really mad?" she asked. I thought about that. Corinne would be furious. She'd see this as a public humiliation. She'd probably stop speaking to me. But I'd already lost her, hadn't I? The daughter who would sell her mother's house without permission wasn't the same little girl who'd spilled grape juice and cried over a stained table. Somewhere along the way, Corinne had stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a responsibility. As a problem to solve. The bus ride downtown felt longer than usual. I watched the city pass by through the smudged window, strip malls, gas stations, neighborhoods I didn't recognize anymore. Everything kept changing. Everything kept moving forward. But I wasn't ready to move forward. Not yet. Not like this. When the bus stopped near the county building, I gathered my purse and stepped off carefully. My knees ached. My hands trembled slightly. But I kept walking. The building was large and gray, with tall columns and wide steps. People streamed in and out, lawyers in suits, families with children, older couples holding hands. I followed the signs to the auction hall. The door was propped open. I could hear voices inside, the shuffle of feet, the rustle of paper. I stood in the doorway for a moment, scanning the room. And that's when I saw her. Corinne. Standing near the front, her back to me, laughing at something Brett said. She wore a navy dress and heels that made her look taller, more powerful. She looked confident. She looked like she'd already won. I felt a flicker of doubt. What if this didn't work? What if the documents weren't enough? What if the auctioneer sided with her? What if everyone in this room looked at me and saw exactly what Corinne saw, a foolish old woman who didn't know when to let go? But then I thought of Marion. I thought of the oak tree in the backyard. I thought of Nellie's voice on the phone, "You've got this, Grandma." And I stepped inside. The moment of truth is here. She's in the room, her daughter has no idea, and the auction is about to start. You won't believe what happens when the bidding begins. The auctioneer's voice boomed through the room, sharp and efficient, as he worked through the first 6 lots. Each property was announced with clinical precision: address, square footage, starting bid. The crowd responded in waves, paddles flicking up, numbers called out, the crack of the gavel marking each sale like a drumbeat. I sat in the back, my paddle resting on my lap, my heart pounding so hard I thought people around me could hear it. Corinne still hadn't turned around. She stood near the front with Brett, whispering to him between lots, checking her phone, completely unaware that I was here. I watched the back of her head and wondered when we'd become strangers. Lot number 7, the auctioneer called, and my chest tightened. 428, Meadowlark Lane. 3-bedroom, 2-bath single-family home. Original hardwood floors, large backyard, established neighborhood. Needs some updating but solid bones. Starting bid, $40,000. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I saw Corinne straighten, her hand reaching for Brett's arm. The auctioneer scanned the room. Do I hear 40,000? Corinne's paddle went up immediately. 40,000, the auctioneer acknowledged. Do I hear 45? A man in a polo shirt raised his paddle. 45,000. Corinne shot him an irritated glance and raised hers again. 50,000. The auctioneer grinned. Now we're moving. Do I hear 55? I felt frozen. My hands gripped the paddle so tightly my knuckles went white. This was it. This was the moment. If I raised my paddle, there was no going back. Corinne would see me. Everyone would see me. They'd know I was bidding on my own house. They'd whisper. They'd judge. They'd think I was pathetic. But if I didn't raise it, I'd lose everything. The auctioneer's voice cut through my thoughts. 50,000 going once. I lifted my paddle. 55,000, I said. My voice was quieter than I intended, but the auctioneer heard me. He pointed in my direction. 55,000 from the lady in the back. Do I hear 60? Corinne turned around. Her eyes found mine, and for a moment, the entire room seemed to stop. Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, disbelief, and then anger. Pure, cold anger. What are you doing here? She hissed, loud enough that people near her turned to look. I didn't answer. I kept my paddle raised. The auctioneer glanced between us, clearly sensing the tension but too professional to stop. Do I hear 60,000? Corinne's mouth opened and closed. Brett put a hand on her shoulder, but she shook him off. She raised her paddle. 60,000, she said, her voice sharp. The auctioneer nodded. 60,000. Do I hear 65? I raised my paddle again. 65,000. The crowd was watching now, fully aware that something unusual was happening. A woman behind me whispered to her companion. Is that her mother? Corinne spun around to face me fully. Her face was flushed, her jaw tight. Mama, stop this. You're embarrassing yourself. I met her eyes. I'm not the one who should be embarrassed, I said. She flinched like I'd slapped her. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Ladies, we need to keep this moving. Do I hear 70,000? Corinne's hand shot up. 70,000. Her voice was louder now, defensive. I raised my paddle. 75,000. She turned back to the auctioneer. 80,000. I didn't hesitate. 85,000. The crowd was fully engaged now, leaning forward, whispering, watching this battle unfold between mother and daughter. Brett tried to pull Corinne aside, but she yanked her arm away. 90,000, she snapped. I felt my pulse racing, but I kept my voice steady. 95,000. The auctioneer looked genuinely surprised. 95,000 from the lady in the back. Do I hear 100? Corinne turned to face me again, and this time there was something desperate in her eyes. Mama, you can't afford this. You don't have that kind of money. I reached into my purse and pulled out the folder Vernon had prepared. I stood up, my legs shaking, and walked toward the front of the room. Every eye followed me. I handed the folder to the auctioneer. Inside, you'll find a notarized revocation of the healthcare proxy that was used to transfer the deed of this property, I said, my voice stronger now. You'll also find documentation that the sale was initiated without my knowledge or consent. This auction should not be taking place. The auctioneer opened the folder, his brow furrowing as he scanned the documents. Corinne stared at me, her face draining of color. The room went completely silent. She just played her hand, and Corinne never saw it coming. But will it be enough to stop the auction? The next few minutes will decide everything. The auctioneer studied the documents for what felt like an eternity. His expression shifted from confusion to concern, and he motioned to a woman in a gray suit standing near the side of the room, probably someone from the county clerk's office. She hurried over, took the folder, and began reading through the pages. The crowd buzzed with whispers. People craned their necks to see what was happening. Corinne stood frozen, her paddle dangling from her hand, her face pale. Brett tried to whisper something to her, but she didn't seem to hear him. She was staring at me like I'd just pulled a gun. "Mama, what did you do?" she asked, her voice barely audible. The woman in the gray suit looked up at the auctioneer and nodded. He cleared his throat and tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a brief recess while we verify some documentation. Lot number 7 is temporarily postponed. Please remain seated or feel free to step outside for a few minutes." A ripple of disappointment and curiosity moved through the crowd. The man in the polo shirt who'd been bidding earlier shook his head and muttered something to his wife. People stood, stretched, pulled out their phones. Corinne didn't move. She just stood there, staring at me, her eyes wide and glassy. Finally, she found her voice. "You can't do this." I didn't respond. I walked past her, out of the auction hall, and into the corridor outside. My legs felt weak. I found a bench near a water fountain and sat down, pressing my hands to my knees to stop them from shaking. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. I'd stopped the auction, at least temporarily. But I also knew this wasn't over. Vernon had warned me that Corinne could still fight. She could challenge the revocation. She could argue that I wasn't competent to make my own decisions. She could drag this out in court for months. I closed my eyes and tried to steady my breathing. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Sharp, fast, angry. I didn't have to turn around to know it was Corinne. "Mama." Her voice was low and furious. "I need to talk to you. Now." I opened my eyes and looked at her. She stood in front of me, her arms crossed, her expression a mixture of rage and disbelief. "You just humiliated me in front of all those people," she said. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I kept my voice calm. "I stopped you from stealing my house." Her jaw tightened. "I wasn't stealing anything. I was trying to help you. You can't take care of yourself anymore. You're going to fall. You're going to get hurt. You're going to end up alone in that house with no one to help you." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something I hadn't noticed before. She was scared. Not of me, but for me. Or maybe of me becoming a burden. Of having to take care of me the way I once took care of her. It wasn't about the house. It was about control. About not wanting to feel responsible. "You never asked me what I wanted," I said quietly. "You decided for me. You took away my choices and called it love." Corinne's face crumpled. I thought I was doing the right thing. Her voice cracked, and for a moment, she looked like the little girl who'd cried over spilled grape juice. I softened, just slightly. "Maybe you thought that," I said. "But it wasn't your decision to make." She wiped at her eyes, smearing mascara across her cheek. "So what now? You're just going to live in that house until you die? Until something happens and no one's there to help you?" I met her gaze. "If that's what I choose, yes." She shook her head, her anger returning. "You're being selfish." I stood up, my own anger flaring. "Selfish? I gave you everything. I raised you in that house. I sacrificed so you could have a better life. And now you want to take the one thing I have left and call me selfish for fighting back? We stood there in the hallway, two women who'd once been everything to each other, now facing off like strangers. Brett appeared at the end of the corridor, hesitant, clearly unsure whether to intervene. Corinne glanced at him, then back at me. "Fine," she said, her voice cold. "Keep the house. But don't come crying to me when you can't manage anymore." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the tile floor. Brett followed, casting one last uncertain glance in my direction. I watched them leave, my heart aching and hardening at the same time. I'd won. But I'd also lost something I wasn't sure I'd ever get back. I sat back down on the bench and let the silence settle around me. After a few minutes, Vernon appeared. He sat beside me, his expression gentle. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure it was true. "The auction's officially postponed," he said. "They're reviewing the documents, but it looks good. You'll keep the house." I nodded again. "Thank you." He patted my hand. "You did good in there, Mrs. Pruitt. You stood up for yourself." I looked down at my hands, wrinkled, spotted with age, but still strong. "Yes," I said quietly. "I did. She's kept her house, but at what cost? Corinne is gone, and the family is shattered. What happens next will surprise you. Keep watching." The house felt different when I walked through the door that evening. It was still mine, legally, officially mine, but it felt heavier somehow. Quieter. I set my purse on the kitchen counter and stood in the middle of the room, listening to the familiar sounds. The hum of the refrigerator. The tick of the clock on the wall. The creak of the floorboards under my feet. These were the sounds of home, but they felt hollow now. I'd fought so hard to keep this place, and now that I had it, I wasn't sure what to do with the victory. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the table, staring at the grape juice stain Marion had said gave it character. I wondered if Corinne remembered that day. I wondered if she remembered anything about the life we'd lived here. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept replaying the scene in the auction hall, Corinne's face when she saw me, the cold fury in her eyes, the way she'd walked away from me in the corridor. Part of me wanted to call her, to explain, to find some way to bridge the gap that had opened between us. But another part of me, the part that had been silenced for too long, knew that I'd done the right thing. I'd stood up for myself. I'd refused to be erased. And if that made me selfish in Corinne's eyes, then maybe I needed to be selfish. Maybe I'd spent too many years putting everyone else first and forgetting that my life, my choices, my home, they mattered too. The next morning, I called Vernon. The county clerk confirmed everything, he told me. The auction has been cancelled. The deed remains in your name. Corinne no longer has any legal authority over your property or your finances. You're free and clear, Mrs. Pruitt. I thanked him, paid his bill, and hung up. Free and clear. The words should have felt like relief, but instead they felt like an ending. I thought about calling Nellie, but I wasn't ready to talk about it yet. Instead, I did what I always did when I needed to think. I went into the backyard. The grass was overgrown. The tomato plants were dead. The tire swing Marion had hung 40 years ago still swayed gently in the breeze, the rope frayed but holding. I spent the afternoon cleaning. I pulled weeds from the garden beds. I raked leaves. I swept the back porch. It felt good to move, to work, to remind myself that I was still capable. Corinne had been so convinced that I couldn't manage, that I needed someone to take care of me. But I was managing just fine. Yes, the roof needed repairs. Yes, the water heater was old. Yes, there were things that would need attention eventually. But those were things I could handle. I could hire someone. I could ask neighbors for help. I could figure it out the way I'd figured everything out after Marion died. I didn't need to be saved. I needed to be trusted. That evening, Nellie called. "Grandma, Mom told me what happened." Her voice was careful, like she was walking on glass. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I told her. She paused. "She's really upset." "I know," I said. Nellie sighed. "She thinks you embarrassed her on purpose." "I didn't do it to embarrass her," I said. "I did it to keep my home." "I know," Nellie said softly. I wish this hadn't happened. I wish you two could have worked it out." I wished that too. But sometimes things break, and no amount of wishing can put them back together. Nellie asked if she could come visit, and I said yes. I needed to see her. I needed to be reminded that not all of my family saw me as a burden. 2 days later, Nellie showed up with grocery bags and a bright smile. She hugged me tight, and for the first time since the auction, I felt like I could breathe. We spent the afternoon baking Marion's old apple pie recipe, the one Corinne used to beg me to make when she was little. Nellie rolled out the dough while I peeled apples, and we talked about everything except Corinne. She told me about school, about her friends, about the job she'd just been offered. She was so full of life, so full of hope. And sitting there with her in my kitchen, I realized that this was what I'd been fighting for. Not just the house, but the life inside it. The memories. The possibility of new ones. The right to decide for myself how my story would end. She's won her home back, but the battle with Corinne is far from over. What happens when mother and daughter are forced to face each other again? Don't go anywhere. 3 weeks passed without a word from Corinne. No calls. No texts. No unexpected visits. It was the longest we'd gone without speaking since she was a teenager, and we'd fought about her wanting to drop out of college. Back then, the silence had lasted 5 days before she'd shown up on my doorstep in tears, apologizing. This time felt different. This time, the silence had weight to it, a thickness that pressed against my chest every morning when I woke up. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself she was the one who needed to apologize. But late at night, when the house was dark and quiet, I missed her. Not the woman she'd become, but the girl she used to be. Nellie visited every weekend. She'd help with small repairs around the house, tightening loose doorknobs, replacing burnt-out light bulbs, organizing the garage. She never mentioned Corinne unless I brought her up first, which I rarely did. One Saturday afternoon, while we were sitting on the back porch drinking lemonade, Nellie finally broke the silence. "Have you thought about reaching out to her?" she asked carefully. I looked at the oak tree, its branches heavy with late autumn leaves. "Why should I be the one to reach out?" I asked. "She's the one who tried to sell my house." Nellie nodded slowly. "I know. But, she's still your daughter. And you're still her mom." I didn't have an answer for that. Because she was right. No matter how angry I was, no matter how betrayed I felt, Corinne was still my child. But I wasn't sure I knew how to reach her anymore. Thanksgiving was coming, and for the first time in 40 years, I didn't plan a dinner. Corinne had always come with Brett, and Nellie would drive up from college, and we'd spend the day cooking and laughing and pretending we were the kind of family that had everything figured out. This year, Nellie asked what I wanted to do. "I don't know," I admitted. She suggested we go out to eat, but that felt wrong. So we compromised. She'd come over and we'd make a small meal, just the two of us. It'll be nice, she said, but I could hear the sadness in her voice. She missed her mother. And even though Corinne had hurt me, I hated that my fight with her was hurting Nellie too. The day before Thanksgiving, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer when I saw Corinne's name on the screen. My hand hovered over the phone, my heart pounding. Finally, I answered. Hello? There was a long pause. Then her voice, quieter than I'd ever heard it. Hi, Mama. We sat in silence for a moment. I didn't know what to say, and apparently neither did she. Finally, she spoke again. I've been thinking a lot. About what happened. About what you said. I waited. I'm not calling to apologize, she said, and my chest tightened. Because I still think I was trying to do the right thing. I still think that house is too much for you. But I should have talked to you. I should have asked what you wanted instead of deciding for myself. It wasn't the apology I wanted, but it was something. It was a crack in the wall she'd built between us. I thought you didn't care what I wanted, I said quietly. I thought I was just a problem you needed to solve. Her breath hitched. You're not a problem, Mama. You're my mother. And I was scared. Scared of losing you the way we lost Dad. Scared of getting a call one day saying you'd fallen and no one found you for hours. Scared of not being able to fix things. I closed my eyes. You can't fix everything, Corinne. And you can't control me just because you're scared. I know, she said, and her voice broke. I know that now. We talked for almost an hour, not about solutions or plans, but about feelings. About fear and anger and loss. About how grief makes people do things they wouldn't normally do. About how love can look like control when you're terrified of losing someone. Before we hung up, I did something I hadn't planned. I invited her to Thanksgiving. Just her, not Brett, not a crowd. Just mother and daughter, sitting at the table where we'd shared so many meals before. She hesitated. Are you sure? She asked. No, I said honestly. But I think we should try. She agreed. And when I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, hope. It was fragile, tentative, barely there. But it was enough. Nellie was thrilled when I told her. Maybe this is the start of fixing things, she said. Maybe, I agreed. Or maybe it was just the start of learning how to be broken together. Either way, it was a start. Mother and daughter are about to sit down together for the first time since the auction. Will they find a way forward, or will old wounds tear them apart again? Stay tuned.